Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 100th episode of Debatable with your hosts, Nina and Kyle. I'm Kyle.
I'm Nina, and as Kyle said, this is the 100th episode. I am overwhelmed in a good way that we've reached this point in our podcasting. I never expected we'd reach 100. Did you expect it, Kyle?
No, because to be honest, right in the beginning, we were like, okay, let's make an episode about prep. Okay, let's make an episode about this theme and that theme. And eventually, I was like, at some point, we're going to run out of themes, right? So thankfully, we didn't run into that anymore. We were just like, hey, how about instead of themes, which are too broad, and all encompassing, let's talk about certain topics within those themes. And for that reason, you're able to do whatever you wanted, basically. Just make it tangentially debatable. Sometimes it's not even debatable at all in the case of like red tagging or when we're talking about like human rights violations. But yeah, so in the beginning, I really didn't know that we would reach episode 100.
And I find it sort of a blessing that we didn't restrict ourselves anymore to that kind of limiting theme based episode. So if you have been here since the beginning, you would know that our starting episodes were very broad, right? And I think that as much as I like those episodes, like I look back fondly on them, I'm really happy that Kyle and I decided to be a lot more specific with what we talked about. That allowed us to, stretch basically all the conversations we have. So, anyway, for today, since it's the 100th episode, we wanted to do something special and introduce you to the team we are working with. You met them last episode already through their favorite motions, but for this episode, we wanted you to meet them through listening to what they are most passionate about. So we asked them to record a 7-minute speech a la debate style about something that they really like or dislike, whatever they wanted to rant about, and we're going to listen to them live and give you a live reaction on these topics.
Yeah, that's the first time that we're listening to them in full, but our instruction, we did give an instruction. We were like, hey, we'd really love to introduce you all to the community, like formally. Unfortunately, because of like this messed up situation we're in, we couldn't really find a time for all of us to record together. So you're just like, how about record something that encapsulates who you are, um, like a debate speech that encapsulates who you are, and then send it to us, and that's what we're going to play back. So that's what we're going to be listening today. That's what we're going to be listening to today. Wow, grammar.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
should start first by talking about why this team was formed. Because I remember last episode, we sort of also just introduced them without giving a sort of backstory of how we got here. So, Kyle, how did we get to this point?
Yeah. So if you read, I mean, like for the like three people who read, I actually don't know how many people read this, but we did get interviewed for the Diliman debate review. I think that's what it's still called, where a lot of these Filipino led debate initiatives were sort of highlighted, and we had the privilege and honor to be featured as one of them. So I suppose because you're talking about how much of an honor it is, I should have downplayed how many people read it. Um, but we did explain the story there. We were like, at first you were just a podcast, but when we realized that our mission or what we wanted from the podcast was to make debate um accessible to everyone, you realize that just podcasting wasn't gonna cut it. We should give people opportunities to practice what they've learned, if they've learned anything from the podcast or from their own trainings. So that's the reason why we created tournaments. And at this juncture, I just want to promote that the second installment of Debatable Open is already open, but which means that you can already register the phase one of the registration process. The first stage is already open for everyone. So just like before, we are super proud of making this concept of like we're using our podcast in order to enhance the experience for tournament goers by inviting a lot of these experts from different fields and then interviewing them on motions that they'd like us to set or that they'd like to set for that tournament. And we're going to repeat that for this year's Debatable Open. So if you want to experience that with us for the second time, this March 19 to 20, you can already start your registration process by going to bit.ly/dope 2022 phase 1. And anyway, since we started doing this whole tournament thing, that's when you realize we couldn't do it alone. Like we could do it alone, like anyone can, I think, hypothetically do it on their own. It's just that it takes so much time, so much effort, and like it will inevitably cause delays, which is why we needed a team. So the first time around we created a team um ad hoc, which means that like it was just an impromptu thing. Like we were talking about it among friends, and we were just like, "Hey, do you wanna organize a tournament?" And we were just like, "Yeah." But then eventually we were like, "Let's make this a thing. Let's make this happen like every year." And that's the origin story, so to speak, of the Debatabeans.
Yeah, so that's the story. Right now we are a team of seven, 7 for 7 minutes, I guess, whatever symbol that may be. And I just want to say that there's a story for how each one joined. So we didn't, formally invite these people. It just kind of happened one day that, one by one, we reached out and they got added to the group chat. And then eventually we sort of finalized what the roles were. So I think it's fate. I don't know what other people call it, coincidence. They think the universe is manifesting something. I think it's just really cool. And I think I met a lot of cool people through this team. And I'm very excited to introduce all of them to you formally. Or actually, we'll have them introduce themselves. So, without further ado, the first person we'd like to introduce is Charlie Vitog. And let's hear what Charlie has to say as their formal introduction.
Hi everyone, what's up? This is Charlie, Chief Content Officer of Debatable. Welcome to the 100th episode. The reason I like debating is because it finds a middle ground between sports and the arts, two of my favorite topics of discussion. My life motto actually comes from rapper, pro wrestler, and actor John Cena, where you have to live by the words of hustle, loyalty, and respect. Thanks.
I forgot that we asked them for their life motto. And it's really interesting to hear Charlie's.
There's sort of like this huge disjunct between like my mental image of Charlie and like their life motto, which is "It's about drive." It's not that, because that's The Rock, not John Cena, but like the hustle thing. Um, that's that's what I really liked about meeting Charlie and getting to know them, because I mean, actually, for all the members of the Debatabeans, I was at some point intimidated by them, Charlie included, even though Charlie is so much younger than us. So it's always a pleasure getting to know these different sides of these amazing and wonderful people.
Do you have a life motto?
Um, no, actually, if I had a motto, it would be like something from Lord of the Rings, like um, there's good in the world and it's worth fighting for. Yeah, Cigar Ganon.
Mine is probably kill them with kindness. I've always had that since high school. I stopped implementing it in college, but I feel like I'm back in that happy phase in my life where I can implement it again?
Yeah, so Charlie is the chief content officer, which means that they are the ones who will eventually be responsible for like newsletters and captions and stuff. Basically whenever you're seeing like formal announcements somewhere, Charlie has probably had a hand in crafting what we're about to say. Which is why like recently we've had such a unique voice in our public statements as debatable, and that's largely because of Charlie. um so what are we going to do next? Are we going to play their their speech, or are we going to move on to the next introduction? I
We
think
should play
speech
their
should be good.
speech. Yeah,
Yeah,
what's their
okay.
topic about?
Um, I think their topic was about
No, they
emotion.
no, their topic is a review of Candy Jar. So
Oh
kind
yeah,
of I
solid.
actually wanted to do this long ago, but we just I don't know.
We
Why did
didn't
we
know how
not?
it fit. We didn't know how it fit like our format, like the podcasting format. We didn't know how to like let's do a movie review, which is a visual medium. But we didn't know how to convert it into the audio medium, which is what a podcast is. Siguro
Yeah.
if this was like a video essay, we would be playing Charlie's like review with like clips from the movie because that falls under fair use.
Yeah, so I guess if you haven't seen the movie, spoiler warning, I guess. I'm not sure exactly what again, we haven't listened to these things. We don't know what it says yet, but I'm just going to give you a spoiler warning to be safe. So this is Charlie's review of Candy Jar. Let's give it a listen.
So today's topic is about the 2018 Netflix original Candy Jar. You've probably heard of this movie before, since there is quite some discussion around it with the debate community. Just a few things about this movie before we get into it. For one, that it features quite an interesting cast. People like Jacob Lottimore from The Maze Runner, Uzo Aduba from Orange is the New Black, and Christina Hendricks, which just has multiple awards as a whole. So yeah, now that we have that done, just a quick gist of the film. Basically, there are two top-notch students, also top-notch debaters in high school. They're forced to be co-presidents of their team, but the twist is that they hate each other. The film is rated average for most audiences, but for the debate audience specifically, it's below average because of the inaccuracies in the way that they portray debate. So that's what we're basically going to talk about today. The first thing I want to weigh then is that why is this movie disliked? And I think that most of these arguments come from the debater perspective. Firstly, is that they say it's not a realistic portrayal of debate. And I've decided to agree with this with a bunch of minor concerns and major concerns. Minor concerns being just like slight inaccuracies, which don't necessarily create significant harm to the viewers, and then the major inaccuracies, which are probably quite offensive. So firstly, in terms of minor concerns, the first thing is that debaters in this film bring their laptops to the podium and just like prepare these motions in advance. And when I say it here in this podcast, it probably wouldn't sound like much of a concern, but admittedly, in all the times that I've watched this movie, this was the main comment that debaters would have, that debate is so much harder compared to how it is portrayed in this movie, right? Just a few scenes that kind of hint on this, where firstly, like a bunch of people are screaming in front of their laptops when they bring it to the podium, or you see a bunch of statistics mentioned in the speech, or even the judges directly saying that the way you cope with a very fast manner of speaking is because these have been emailed to each other in advance. So yeah, from there, the main premise is just like these speeches probably have a lot of like rigorous research behind them, and you've heard these arguments before, you've probably had days to prepare them. The first realization I've had here, since the first time I watched the movie was in my freshman year of high school, but I recently watched it like a few days ago just to make this review. This whole debating on laptops thing probably shouldn't be a concern anymore. I feel like with the whole online debating thing, we have found ourselves in this position multiple times since most of us have been using devices absent paper or absent the usual index cards. But second is that this whole prepared speeches thing, I get that it isn't the usual debate formats that we're used to, where we have to cram our speeches in 15 or 30 minutes or 1 hour, like in the BP, AP, or Australs formats. But when you do refer back to WSTC tournaments, there are a lot of prep motions, and just given the other details given in the movie, like let's say that you have 8 minutes to speak, then you kind of can come to the conclusion that perhaps they're doing the WSDC format, but always it's just like a small realization, not much effect, but I just thought it was quite interesting to realize. The second concern is that the concept of two club presidents was depicted as outrageous in the film because it was quote-unquote undemocratic. Now, I think that this is odd, considering that many debate institutions do have things like co-captain systems where not one captain is higher than the other. However, it was undemocratic in this movie, and I think they are fair enough to call it out because they skipped the whole usual election process after having an even number of members for that school year. And I think this is just an interesting to note interesting thing to note, right? Why is that? Note that in most votes in debate, like let's say in equity or in panels or in ad score, what ends up happening is like you do not want to have an even number of people because you know that in the event that someone splits sides, then perhaps there will be a tied result, and you want to avoid that. That is why we take mitigating measures to this, like let's say, giving the chair 2 votes in a panel for BP or for AP, etc. So yeah, when this is the case, I think it's just like these small processes that we do have to follow as debaters in the debate community, which they do get to embody in the film. So perhaps kudos to them for that. But this whole exaggeration of having 2 club presidents, and suddenly that's what the whole conflict of the film revolves around, is something that I feel like then somewhat affected the quality of the film as well in terms of how much it was relatable. Yeah. The second thing I want to do then is weigh out the major concerns. There are also 2 things under this. For one, people say that it portrays debaters as introverted and antisocial, and I do feel like this is a fair enough complaint, right? It's the fact that Bennett Russell, which is the male protagonist of this film, says that he doesn't go on romantic dates because the only thing he knows how to do is argue with people. Or perhaps the female protagonist, Lona Skinner, is unfamiliar with classic movie references when her professor talks about whiplash, or to actively rebut the other adults in the film when they say follow your heart, and her response is to say that, well, my heart is just like a part of my body, it does not influence the decisions that I make in life. So here I feel like I found it quite offensive in a sense that a lot of debaters are just like quite interesting people. Admittedly, a lot of debaters aren't just debaters. A lot of the time, these are athletes outside of debate. These are artists outside of debate. They are perhaps youth leaders, student leaders, or just anything else other than being a debater. So yeah, I think this is just the first thing. But second is that it forgets the good parts of debate as well. And this is another major complaint. How does that look like? So it pretends that these are probably instances that are exclusive to high school rather than lifelong relationships that you are able to build in debate. So here they say that perhaps the experiences you have are something that will only matter in high school because the only reason you are in debate is because you're supposed to prepare yourself for the future. And as long as you reach that future, then your debate career is done for you. So this is basically what is implied here in this film, which I feel like isn't the case for most people. A lot of lifelong relationships, friendships, and just like experiences that are very much worth remembering do happen in debate. So from there, I do feel like that's something that I just want to clarify. If ever you're trying to learn more about debate but decided to watch this movie, please do not depend on how debate is depicted in this movie. But now, credits to the film. What are some good things here? Firstly, I think it is realistic in the sense that we care too much for our debate careers, that we put ourselves in unwanted positions. How does that look like? So, Bennett and Lona dislike each other, but had to be partners because they are the top-notch debaters of their school. So perhaps in our world, this would be like the team A that you would have gotten in, like, matchups based on like the results of tryouts or something. So we do find ourselves in these positions sometimes, and this is why I feel like this portrayal was good. And perhaps this is what the movie plot should have been dependent on, that sometimes you have to partner up with people because you are the strongest team, or just a general idea that you do not get to choose your partner, and therefore you end up disagreeing with each other, or perhaps you just don't like them as a person. And that's what debate does to us sometimes. We put ourselves in unwanted positions. So I feel like this should have been the main conflict of the film, as compared to this whole you dislike them simply because you are co-presidents as well. The second problem here is that, the second good thing about this film, rather, is that it's a coming-of-age film, and I really want to highlight this for this discussion. How does that look like? So, debaters in the film do not care about the present. And in fact, there are scenes which imply that the only reason they debate is just so that they can invest into their future. How does that look like? When there are active discussions about Yale University being their dream college, and as soon as they get accepted into it, they're done with this whole debate thing. From here, I feel like this is an interesting aspect because a lot of the time as debaters, we are unable to realize how much debate forces us to grow up. How does that look like? That perhaps you are a middle schooler who joined debate, but now you find yourself talking about things like discrimination and just like the death of minorities, or perhaps now you learn how to travel with people who aren't part of your family. You learn how to travel alone and like a bunch of friends. So from here, I do feel like these are very, very exclusive to debate that are embodied in this movie, that it's coming of age and you are forced to grow up in debate, and that's what I really appreciated about this. So my final review about this movie then, with everything I just said, is that, for one, if you are a debater then perhaps you can watch this film. If you're a debater that knows how debate works, knows how to question which parts of these are actually true. But if you're someone who's only interested in knowing more about debate and don't necessarily have a full grasp of the dynamics of it yet, please do not watch this movie yet. Because what ends up happening is that it might give you a very, very negative perspective of debate. There is a very nice part in the movie, though, where throughout this partnership, by the way, and I guess I should have inserted this a while ago, throughout this partnership between Bennett and Lona, because they were forced to come together, even if they started as rivals or enemies and just hating each other and plain all of that, they do end up building a very strong relationship throughout the movie, and I think that's just something that embodies what is very good about debate. That it finds you in situations where you probably built connections with people that you wouldn't have built connections with otherwise, and it is precisely debate that brought you together. So yeah, I guess that's just everything from me today. Hoping you guys like the discussion. Thanks.
Yeah, I suddenly remember the movie Candy Jar, and like I do agree. I think one of our main qualms with it, Kyle, was that it was super inaccurate in portraying debate. But I did realize, and this is for everyone's you know, knowledge, that there are formats in the United States that use this kind of speed reading, that read from laptops. Basically, when you read a lot of stuff, it's called spreading. Like you spread the case as much as you can by saying as much as you can in as little time as possible. This is very common in public forum debates. Though don't ask me for the specifics because that's not a format I do. But it's just interesting to note that the American style of debating um is quite different from what we usually do here in Asia.
Yeah, I think that that is actually true. That when we think of debating, we don't usually think of spreading. Although for a very long period of time, in other places in the world, like especially the United States, when you say debating, that is what you think of. You think of spreading. So I think it's like public policy debates. When I was like younger in 2010s, the early 2010s, I googled on YouTube. I searched on YouTube like debate videos. And back then, there weren't a lot of debate videos in the Asian or British parliamentary format, except for the few like worlds videos. A lot of it is, portraying spreading. Um, but I think that what can be interesting to talk about from Candy Jar is how can we bring debating to a mass audience, right? Because the problem with Candy Jar and other movies or like TV shows, if there are any about debating, is how do you portray the act of debating in such a way that it communicates its appeal? So, like, even if Candy Jar was accurate in how it portrays activity, in my opinion, it still wouldn't communicate why debating would be a fun activity. Like, for example, how it's often a mental game of chess, where you can bring up a silver bullet argument and like you're gonna watch them struggle to pick up the pieces of their case. Um, how at least in my case, what I really like about debating is the ability to tell stories and craft your own worlds in 7 minutes, or how you hone critical thinking and can see nuance faster, see logical flaws faster. So I think at some point we should make it so that we accept the trade-off, right? Like it's okay if for me, it's okay if the movie is not completely accurate to how the sport plays in reality, so long as it portrays how it feels. So I'm thinking of like Yu-Gi-Oh, for example, where like you watch Yu-Gi-Oh, or I watched Yu-Gi-Oh, and it's nothing like how it plays competitively, but it does get people going. It does get people interested into playing the game first and foremost, and from there that's when they learn, the more technical rules.
Reminds me of the comic that we bought like way long ago, like before COVID. Was it before COVID, Kyle, that we bought this
Yeah,
comic?
before COVID.
Yeah, so the comic's name is Point Ma'am, and it's a accurate representation of what it's like to be in a debate community. It's also very LGBT ridden, which is
Ridden?
very accurate. Yeah, like it's full of LGBT characters. Isn't
No,
it?
I was like, is that the negative? Does ridden have a negative connotation?
Oh, I don't know. I never used it in a negative way, but it could have. I'm sorry if it did.
It has
It's
a
just
lot of LGBT representation. Yeah.
yeah. So Point Ma'am, it's by at Tiny Carabao. I'm not sure if that's still their handle. I could search that and I could promote you properly if I find your new Twitter handle. But basically, Point Ma'am was a comic that talked about more of the competitive aspect of debating and the fears and insecurities that come with it. And I think this um deals with what Charlie was talking about, right? Because they were talking about how it's good that it's a coming of age story, but more focus could have been given to the fact that it's very intimidating to be in debate and things like that. So I think this comic does that well, and I'm sure one day, maybe one day, we will have a show or a movie or a book that talks about the debate community accurately. Or you know what, Kyle, why don't we make one? Like I remember we talk about this a lot before, like we want to make an anime about debate or something,
Yeah,
but
we were
still
like, yeah, we were like, what if whenever someone like makes a really good rebuttal, we could visualize it as like someone like pulling a bowstring and then like, oh, it's so tense right now. And it's like, oh, the tension has been released. Oh no, the argument has been destroyed. Like Kaguya-sama, like Love is War.
yeah, basically something like that. So yeah, so thank you so much, Charlie, for that interesting take on Candy Jar. Makes me want to watch the movie again. And if you haven't seen it, as a debater, just watch it. Like you don't need to love it, but it's like the closest we're going to get so far into popular media. So might as well, just take it, absorb it, hate it, love it. It's up to you, It's just a story about us, so decide how you want to take it.
Yeah, so with that, let's move on to the next member of the Debatabeans. Who's the one who's next? Because
And
we're doing this alphabetically, so like after C, there is
it's J.
Nico.
No, you're missing a
Oh
bunch of
no!
letters.
Okay, yeah, I missed a bunch of letters. The next one is J.
Yeah, J. So we're going to hear J's introduction now.
Hi everyone, I'm Jay. I'm a finance and management student, and I'm also the chief marketing officer for Debatable, and I've done some tech director stuff with Debatable as well. Uh, the reason why I used to be very into and why I used to really love debate was because you could find your group of nerds that would just geek out about a certain topic like economics, and you'd really get to know them. Aside from the competitive stuff, which makes debate toxic, I think that's why a lot of people are staying in debate. Uh, my life's motto is from the very profound and very poetic Dwayne The Rock Johnson. It's about drive, it's about power. We stay hungry, we devour, put in the work, put in the hours, and take what's ours. Let's go!
I can't believe this. I can't believe this. I just made a joke. I just made a joke earlier about how Charlie is just like, it's about drive, it's about power. And then Jason, I think it's just fate that like it was Charlie and then it was Jay.
Yeah, so I think they have similar mottos, like whatever, like super fun. So the story of how I met Jay. I met Jay through our previous work at Outspoken. Shout out to us, Outspoken, another great Philippine initiative for debate education. We used to work for Outspoken, and Jay and I were super close there. Basically, Jay's role was to support me. Um like basically like an assistant role, though I never called it that. Um Jay would always wake up at 8 a.m. because they found out I woke up at 8 a.m. and they'd message me first thing in the morning asking, "Hey Nino, what do you need me to do today?" And like Jay is just super on point. They are unstoppable. So Jay, thank you for joining our team. You're amazing. Get your life together, however, outside of debate and work fronts. And I say that
Wow.
as a friend. Uh, but like we all have our stuff, so that's it. Jay's topic for today is kind of interesting. It's about super teams in sports and how they are not that great. The word they
Yeah.
put here is they are, but I will censor that word. They are not that great. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, so Jay's work as like the marketing officer for Debatable is so important because um we always had trouble with the social media side of things because we're often so busy and we can't really understand, we don't really understand this techie world where we sort of need to find out what's the optimal time to post certain things, and like how do we expand our reach and stuff. So Jay has been super helpful in like helping us understand that side of like this world of posting stuff more often and trying to get as many people like listening and into debate as possible. So that is why like we're so lucky, actually we're actually so lucky to have Jay Postrado in our team. Like I cannot even put words to the amount of gratitude that I have for this person. But yeah, so aside from that, like their amazing abilities to analyze social media statistics and data and whatnot. Actually, they were so happy, like staring at basically walls of numbers. Um, they're also very much into sports and very much into international relations, which is like probably the two topics that people are least likely to say are their favorites alongside economics. So I'm going to learn a lot from this this spiel that Jay prepared for us.
Same, same. So let's play it.
Yeah, and the topic that I'm going to talk about today is surprise, surprise, man in the room, sports. Specifically, my deep seated hatred for super teams that are growing in sports, which disallows a lot of individuals from being able to grow. This allows a lot of small market teams to be able to find their audiences, and more than that, how it generally harms competition in the sports as a whole. So the first thing we have to discuss is what are super teams? What do they look like? And how they might be not that good in general. So what a super team basically is when a rich billionaire owner of a sports franchise, let's say the Los Angeles Lakers, let's say the Brooklyn Nets, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, are able to sign multiple players that are of really high caliber, or that these players have really huge clout, and at that point they're able to keep them. So what this means is, for the company or for the franchise, they are able to pay these players wages, but more than that, they also pay luxury taxes, which means that in excess, because they have multiple star level players that they have to sustain and they're keeping them away from other teams, they have to pay a certain amount of a fine. That's what the luxury tax is. And since these billionaire players probably are rich, they could just stomach that because they have the excess money to be able to do so, right? So what do these super teams look like right now? More notably, this could look like the Brooklyn Nets, how they're able to sign Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, Paul Millsap, how they're able to sign LaMarcus Aldridge. I can go on and on. It's the Brooklyn Nets. Los Angeles Lakers, how they're able to sign LeBron, Anthony Davis, and Russell Westbrook. This also can go to the NFL with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, specifically talking about Tom Brady, Rob Gronkowski, Antonio Brown, and a lot of other sport leagues. So, at large, what we're talking about are large multinational corporations that are able to literally just buy out the reason why people are watching sports for all star caliber players. And why this is therefore harm the sport in general. So first, we're going to talk about small market teams. Generally, the way small market teams are described in layman's term are these are teams that basically just have to rely on drafting. They have to rely on the skills of players because not a lot of all stars want to compete for these low level teams because they're not gonna get seen, they're not gonna get watched, they're not gonna get as enough clout in social media and stuff like that. So these teams could look like Milwaukee. These teams could look like maybe I don't know, like Toronto maybe. So the reason why that's particularly bad for them is because They are not able to get as much ticket revenue, or they're not as watched well. They don't get as much TV deals, for instance, such that their team is able to get better equipment, such that their team is able to grow more and stuff like that. The reason why I really, really don't like super teams is because often a lot of teams are SME funded or even uh, community funded. So one of my favorite teams is the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers of the NFL, as most of you might not know, is that they're community owned. The community literally pays the team, and they don't earn as much profit. What they do is just they give off their own money such that the team is able to survive, for instance, and they're still able to churn in high quality players. They're still able to win a Super Bowl. Aaron Rodgers is still able to win an NFL MVP. So for me, those teams really stick out the most because those teams are where the sport lives. Because the people get to watch them. People would voluntarily try to skip a meal so that they're able to literally just watch the NFL and the Green Bay Packers play. The reason why super teams in return hurt them is because super teams would naturally retract those TV deals, such that those TV deals go to places like New York, the Madison Square Garden, such that they go to Staples Center in Los Angeles, for instance. Uh, the reason why that's particularly harmful is because rather than these people who are working really hard, sacrificing a lot, for instance, rather than them being able to get those TV deals, those ad revenues, or just some multinational support, they're unlikely to be able to do that because a lot of people would just like to watch Kevin Durant play with James Harden, with Kyrie Irving, and more than that. So surface level fans, which are, let's admit, most of the fans in sports, would naturally gravitate to this because they see, whoa, it's literally all-star weekend every weekend or every game when you watch the Brooklyn Nets, when you watch the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And that's a certain form of excitement that you would not be able to see with small market teams anymore because oftentimes watch time is a zero sum. Not a lot of people get to just sacrifice a lot of their time to watch sports. Often, the average person would watch maybe 2 games per week, and that's not very good for these teams because they have to naturally compete for those demographic. So more than that, so it's literally killing the small market teams. Uh, Secondly, it doesn't make the sport enjoyable because you realize that what makes an all-star or what makes a superstar in a team is that they're able to play with their own fluidity. They are able to showcase their own skill. But when you put them on the same team, on the same court with the same ball, they have to share it. And oftentimes these players regress. These players are not go succeeding. They don't win championships. An example of this would be the Houston Rockets with Charles Barkley, Hakeem Olajuwon, and Scottie Pippen. And oftentimes the sport just becomes dull and boring to watch. So super teams often do this because a lot of the times these players just want money and cash grabs. But what they do in return is hurt small market teams, hurt very passionate individuals who want to watch the sport. And that's just generally not good for the sport. So yeah, that's my rant on super teams, why they probably should not exist, and why the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, or maybe the handball association of the world should also try to put a leash on these things because it's just not enjoyable to watch anymore. Thanks. Have a nice day, everyone.
Yeah, so if anyone was curious as to like how a debater could know so much about sports, the first thing is that we have to stop seeing debaters as some sort of monolith, and I learned that lesson only very recently because I have like understood the debate community to go like almost universally go like sports, I don't know so much about sports. But like just in the past year, I have seen so many people who are so interested in sports from the debate community. It's not just like I dabble in it. They're just like they tweet regularly about it. I'm just like, wow. But what's very special about Jay was that they used to be a sports writer. So that's like two reasons why their work is just so amazing. The first one is that they are able to communicate like ideas that we don't really understand, like Nina and I, as people who are not super into sports, in ways that are accessible to a wider audience that even we are used to. And secondly, it is actually because of their writing background that we reached out to them and asked them, hey, do you want to write um a weekly episode for us where we talk about like what happened this week, that recap, that matter loading with Nina and Kyle thing that we did last year. We are going to do that again this year, siguro after Debatable Open 2022. But yeah, that's all because of Jay. We honestly couldn't have done any of those matter loading episodes without Jay's help.
So going to now the actual content of the presentation or spiel that Jay gave. Quite interesting because most of the time you barely think about how, big league sports affects like the small market ones. So I think it's really interesting to see that, I think this applies outside of sports as well. Like our obsession with the all stars, our obsession with the big names, and how it seems that the trading culture in sports affects how we appreciate how the game is played overall, right? And I think if you want to apply it to debate, it's also a thing here. I don't want to go into specifics because that's like gossip culture already, but it does happen as well, right? The trading happens, recruitment is a thing. It seems that special attention is given to certain people. And I say this as someone who has both been on the side that benefited from it and has been at a disadvantage from it, right? So I think in sports as well, it's interesting in a debate sense because you think, at least most debaters think that it doesn't affect us. But as you should all know, sports is a big part of our culture. It's a part of people's identities, even. So, understanding how it works internally and what the systems are also tells you how people respond, how people live their lives because of it, and how people's days might be shaped because of certain things. Like, as Jay mentioned, some people skip meals just to watch certain teams play, right? And it seems so fascinating to me that people would go to that extent. And it's all manufactured by, people way up that decide who goes where, what time slots are taken. And I'm not sure if this is a debate motion. And Jay, if it isn't, I think it should be. And, like, I want to hear more about it, but I will not understand it, to be honest, Jay. But I want to hear more about it because I'm fascinated with how it relates to everything else that goes on in the world. I just don't know the names that you are citing and the specific teams you are saying, but I do appreciate the spirit. I'll be honest about that.
I like thinking about super teams and like our sort of obsession with super teams in the same way that I imagine our sort of obsession with Avengers and like superheroes has come to be, because like very recently with Endgame from 2019 and all the way up to today with the multiverse stuff in the MCU, we really want our superheroes to make crossovers, right? Like, wouldn't it be cool if the Human Torch like teams up with Captain America, because they're both played by Chris Evans, right? So I feel like that is where a lot of these people are coming from. Like, they are real life superheroes, athletes, because they're capable of doing things that the regular person just cannot imagine doing. Which is why we always think like, what if you get like the best of the best of the best and put them into one team? That would be super amazing. Um, just like any comic book artist's dream would be like, you know, putting all these really cool characters together. And speaking of artists, comic book artists, let's talk about Jill, who is the next member of the Debatabeans that we wanted to talk about. Unfortunately, because of some personal circumstances, they weren't able to give us the usual intro and spiel. But if you follow Debatable for any amount of time, even if you're just listening to this episode, you're already familiar with the incredible work that Jill has been able to create for us at Debatable, because they are the publicity officer for Debatable, in the sense that, all of the artistic things that we're not capable of doing, generally speaking, Jill is the one who's working on that. Like all the art, that's Jill.
Yeah, if you see our podcast cover, that's Jill. Like, Jill is the first person we've ever collaborated with, because we've collaborated with them before the podcast was even launched. So we asked them for the podcast cover, and then after that, when Debatable InterVarsity 2021 was launched, we asked them to be the person to make our publicity material, like the poster, the phase pubs, like every other pub that's needed. They also did the same for Debatable Open, and now they're doing it for Debatable Open 2022. And again, I'm plugging it. Phase 1 is open, so if you want to sign up, you should do that there. If you want to know more about it, you can visit our pages at Podcast Debatable, or send us an email actually at podcastdebatable@gmail.com, or visit our Facebook page, Debatable with Nina and Kyle, or you can visit our Twitter, Podcast DBTVL, to find out more about the event. But anyway, so Jill is amazing. Jill actually used to be our student when we taught at St. Paul. Um, and wow, that makes me feel very old, Kyle. Like, we were there since they were in high school, and now they're in college. They're still in our lives,
That was
and now
6 years ago, right?
yeah, or
Like
something like
six
that.
or 5 years
Maybe,
ago.
yeah, 6, 5, maybe even 7. I'm not sure, but like, they've been a student of mine since forever, and having them as a partner now is so surreal to me. So Jill, if you're listening, we're so happy that we got to see you grow. Wow, I'm getting sentimental on the podcast. Sentimental on Maine. But basically, I'm very happy that I get to work with Jill, and that, artists get to have the limelight at a lot of like places here in Debatable. Like, we want to feature artists as much as we can and compensate them well. And I'm happy that Kyle and I have a platform that we're finally able to do that. So we like hiring different artists to be able to sort of give back to them, give them an opportunity to shine. And, as a result, we also get kick-ass like posters and kick-ass podcast covers. If you see them cycle through different like phases, like our Christmas ones and whatever, you can thank Jill, because they gave me all the elements that I get to experiment with. But yes, Jill is not able to join us today. um Kyle, do you know what their topic was supposed to be about?
Their topic was supposed to be about. Hold on. If I was saying it was about like Disney or something.
No, that's you. You like Disney.
No,
It
no,
was
no. that's a different. That's a different Kyle thing.
mm-hmm.
Um, their thing was about
Feminism
feminism in
in,
Disney movies. Yeah.
no, not Disney movies. It's just feminism in villainesses and historical fantasy fictions. I'm not sure why your mind instantly went to Disney, Kyle. It's very telling, but when you say fantasy, the first thing that comes to your mind is Disney. But yeah, it's just about feminism in the villains of different fantasy genres. I think that's super interesting. I want to interview Jill for this one day. Sadly, they didn't get to be introduced for this.
Yeah, maybe in a future episode you could make it. We can actually make this entire thing.
Yeah, we can make it an entire episode. So anyway, let's do that for Jill. But yeah, this is Jill. We'd like to introduce you to them. You're already familiar with their work. They need no introduction. They speak with their art. So thank you, Jill, for being part of the team. Very happy to have you here. The next person is Nico Bombayo. Uh if you've been following Debatable for a while, you know Miko. They've been on the show twice already. One for a motion contributor stint that they did for Debatable. Was it Debatable Open or Debatable InterVarsity? I think it was InterVarsity, right, Kyle?
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was debatable. Ivy.
Yeah, so Debatable IV, they were a motion contributor, and then they made another episode with us on a particular motion. Um, So I'm really happy that they're part of the team. So the story of how I met Nico this time is also through Outspoken. We worked together there. We were co-coaches. And then Nico and I just became friends. I'm not sure how to explain it, but we just connected. Oh no, I didn't meet Miko through work. We met through this time I was AgCore. I think it was VMDC. And Miko and I were hanging out, and Miko had this amazing tendency to guess what the next theme of the tournament was going to be. And I was AgCore, so I can't react, right? I can't give any clues. But Miko was just like on point with their psychic mind, reading my movements. And like I had half a mind to avoid them for the rest of the tournament because I felt like I was like breaking some ethical code even if I wasn't doing anything. Because Miko was just that good at reading my mind. Miko got the finals that year. Not because of me, I promise. They're just really that good. And then after that, we haven't really spoken until, we got to work together online. And then one thing led to another, and we invited Miko to be on our team. And that's how I know Miko. You met Miko before Debatable or only through Debatable initiatives?
Um, Actually, I've never met Miko. I never met them in real life. So I
Oh
did
no,
know of
yeah.
them. Yeah. So we were actually talking about this the other day, and they were telling me that I used to be so intimidated by it. I was like, yeah, same. But that's because I'm intimidated by everyone. Um so Miko, since you talked about them, just like being able to see into the future, they also have this weird ability to read our presents and pasts. So the thing about Miko as well is they're so good at like tarot readings, fortune tellings, and stuff like that, and it's kind of scary sometimes. Miko's role in our team is the chief talent officer, which means that they're first of all they're very talented. Like if you've ever heard them sing, it's really cool. But second,
I don't think that's what it means.
yeah, but what it really means is that they basically just take care of the people within the team. So you can think of it as like human resources or HR work. They sort of psychologically profiled us already. Like they gave us a survey already, and every now and then they do like mental health checks, and that was very useful when they ended up becoming the tournament director for Magiting Cup,
Yeah.
because they just had this wonderful ability to sort of be super understanding about like where different people are coming from, their own personal circumstances, and that's a really great thing that you want for a leader. Yeah. So what is Miko going to talk about today?
Them introduce themselves first, and then we can talk about their
Oh yeah,
very
sorry.
interesting topic. Like
Hello.
they have a very interesting topic. But let's listen to them introduce themselves.
Hello, everybody. You might know me from a few other Debatable episodes, but I'm Nico Bombayo. I'm the Chief Talent Officer for Debatable. And basically, what I do is I make sure that everyone is happy. I make sure that things are okay. And I also will scout talents for Debatable in the near future when we do scale and when we need more people. So you'll be seeing a lot of me if you have plans on joining the Debatable team. It's basically like an HR job as well. So I just make sure that everything within the organization, within the team is all good and that there are no tensions and that everyone is happy. The reason why I love debate is because it allows for people to talk about a lot of serious things in a way that is safe, in a way where they don't have to fear ridicule or judgment. And I really love how people are able to share their ideas regardless of their skill level, regardless of where they come from or what institution they belong to. And debate is really just an environment where people are allowed to grow and discover things about themselves as well. My motto in life would probably be something that I heard from a YouTube channel called Yes Theory, and it's seek discomfort because basically growth is a result of discomfort. You can never grow or you can never develop in places where you are comfortable. So always look for opportunities where you are in discomfort, that challenges you to grow and that challenges you to become a better person as well.
Yeah. So their topic today is very interesting. Um, it's about being marupok. How would you describe being marupok in English, Kyle, for our non-Filipino viewers
I
or
think like the
listeners?
closest term that you could get to explain what marupok is would be basically like simp. But like what from what I understand, Miko has like a defense of being marupok. So maybe it's different from being a simp. Maybe there's like a more specific definition. But like basically in my head, it's basically like simping. Or maybe like feeling very deeply for a person. Yeah, something like that.
Okay, okay. Let's give it a listen and discover what being marupok is all about. But before that, Kyle, do you consider yourself a marupok person?
Um you know me, so you know that I am very marupok.
Yeah,
That is to say,
I
like,
don't know what it means, so I can't really say if you are. That's why I'm asking if you are.
no, remember the time when
Oh,
I
never mind.
had,
Yeah, you are a simp. Yeah, like before you dated me, you were a major simp for other people. Like
yeah, so
that's the
like
definition.
I would have plans, like actual plans for myself, and I'd be like, I would drop them. I would just drop them without really caring about like my friends. I'm sorry, Nina, because you were that particular friend. But like I ditch people because the people that I simp for just go like, hey, do you want to watch this movie with me? And I'd be like, well, yeah, I have nothing planned.
How
I
dare
have no.
you?
I'd be like playing with my fingers, and I'd be like, yeah, I've got nothing planned.
Okay, let's listen to Miko's spiel. Let's see how it goes.
Okay, so the topic that I'll be talking about for this episode is the philosophy of being marupok. And for our foreign listeners out there, marupok is a Tagalog word which basically means that you have a greater inclination to falling in love or to romantic feelings than a regular person is. You're more inclined to fall for a person or to have romantic feelings for a person, even when that person only does the bare minimum, like it's just a generally kind or okay person, and stuff like that. And the reason why I chose this topic is because being marupok gets a very bad rap within society or within the community. Because people are like, oh, but you're putting yourself up to like more disappointment, or you're setting yourself up for disappointment in the future, or you're just constantly hurting yourself and you're falling for people who might not like you back or might not be interested in you in that way. And while those statements have some truth within them, I think it's also important to assess why people are marupok to begin with, why people have an inclination to just fall in love, not on a whim, but on a scale that is easier in comparison to everyone else within society as well. So the first thing that I want to highlight is how being marupok is a manifestation of how you as an individual is just a generally loving person. Because the people who tend to be marupok, like myself, usually have a lot of experiences that might have deprived them or might have limited the amount of affection or care that they received in the past. Or maybe they're just the type of people whose love languages involve investing heavily in the people that they're attracted to or that they're attached to. Which means that these are generally people that have a deep connection with romance, a deep connection with love. It might even be an after effect of like being a hopeless romantic, for example. And it's these types of things that are usually looked over when you look at people or when people ridicule those who are marupok, those who are hopeless romantics, because they think that the way that people perceive love, the way that people perceive romance, is in a way detrimental to their stability. But for me personally, the reason why I am marupok is because I appreciate the way that people interact with each other, especially when they care heavily or care intensely about a certain individual. So, for example, if you have a significant other, if you have a partner or a boyfriend or a girlfriend, you're more able to convey your emotions and you're more able to establish how you feel, even when that relationship is happening, or even in instances where that relationship has rocky moments. And I think that's also part of the beauty of being marupok, right? You're able to communicate effectively because you feel things so deeply. You understand the intensity of your emotions. You understand the impacts of your actions as well. And that allows you to communicate those emotions properly to the person that you are in a relationship with, or even someone that you have a crush on. Now, as with all things, being marupok isn't all good, right? I'm not trying to create propaganda for marupokness or being someone who is easily like enticed into a relationship or enticed by a different individual or easily attracted to other people as well. It's very important to guard your heart, especially when you know that you are marupok, because we have a tendency, or we have a very large inclination to bare our soul to the people that we fall in love with. My version of that is that I like to make playlists for the people that I like. So if you follow me on Spotify, none of them are on private, by the way. If you follow me on Spotify, you'll see a lot of playlists with very weird titles. Like one of them is 1:43 a.m., the other is Lovers Stay the Night, and stuff like that, where I just put songs that remind me of that person, or songs that I'd like to dedicate to that person as well. And I feel like that's a good translation of what I feel, especially because I am a very musical person. It's a great way to convey the emotions that I feel for a certain individual and encapsulate it in a list of songs or a playlist that they can listen to and hopefully remember me when they listen to it as well. And it's not all good. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. Like, I definitely had moments where I did fall for the wrong person, where I did make playlists for the person who hurt me the most. But I think that that's part of the process. I would even say that people who are marupok are significantly more able to grow as individuals in terms of romance because of the way that they feel things. So when things go badly, or things go south for these individuals, they're more likely to process these emotions properly in a way that makes them feel everything, and in a way that makes them understand what went wrong even in the situation or in the relationship. Sure, it can last a long time. Like, I remember it took me 4 or 5 months to move on from this guy that I liked way back in December 2020. But in the grand scheme of things, I am in a better place because after those 4 months, I was able to reconcile my emotions for that person, and I was able to like assess why this person wasn't good for me. So it also allows you to have a perspective as to what is beneficial for you in a relationship, as to what benefits you as an individual in terms of your growth, in terms of what your needs are within a relationship as well. That isn't to say that marupok people have an easier time in relationships. Sometimes we do sacrifice a lot of things. We make a lot of compromises because we are so in love with this person, or we are so attached to this person, that we think that we're willing to like wait for months before like dating them or getting that official label, or maybe even just like tolerating a few things that they do that are negative or detrimental because we are attracted to them, or because we think that we can quote unquote fix them. And those are definitely mistakes that I have personally made in my life. So for those who are listening, and for those who are marupok as well, please don't be like me. Please be smarter about who you fall in love with. But in the grand scheme of things, again, it's the best way to understand as well what you really desire out of a relationship. Each individual that you fall for, and this is true for everyone as well, there are lessons that have to be learned from that person. And sometimes, even though that person isn't the one who's meant to be or isn't supposed to be in your life for a long time, the lessons that you learn from them are lessons that will stay with you and help you grow.
That was heavy. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, you can really see that they were a psych major, so you can really see it in their spiel, like very perceptive, very understanding, very loving. And what I really appreciated about it is the amount of introspection that they were able to do. And I remember I was talking to Kla before, and they were asking me for help understanding how to build some of these arguments that do a lot about feelings. And my main advice was like, try to introspect, like put yourself in their shoes and then make the introspection and then sort of explain, like try to put into words things that you already understand. Like
Mm.
a lot of these things, like loving another person or not loving another person or being scared or being anxious about something, those are already things that you really understand. The problem is you don't know how to put it into words. And that is a good practice that you can have if you're debating or if you're a writer or artist. Like that's basically what we do here in debates. Like you're telling stories, and that could be like stories of other people, of countries, but it can also be your own story or the story of someone who's close to you. And that's something I super appreciate in like the style that Miko has when they debate and when they think about like these different topics. Because to be honest, this could be a debate motion, right? This could be like this house supports or celebrates, or this house would be marupok, right?
I can imagine that. So I guess I want to talk about now the content of it because I am very practical as a person. You know this, Kyle. And I think by now the audience should know I'm a very pragmatic person. So my feelings usually take the back seat. I usually assess things like a debate. Like I am your stereotypical debater that assesses situations with pros and cons, that tries to make decisions based on which side outweighs the other. I am your stereotypical person that makes to do lists and checklists about things. So, this topic is kind of hard for me to grasp, like being marupok or having your emotions on your sleeves. And I think that's something I need to work on because it's not that I personally give it a bad rep. It's just I don't know how to apply it without overdoing it. And I'm not sure what your stance here is, Kyle, but I do have this belief that there's also such a thing as giving yourself too much, right? Like you end up becoming a doormat, or you end up like feeling things too much to the point that you leave yourself vulnerable and open to attack. Or maybe that's just because I'm a woman and I've been in situations where I've been um taken advantage of because of that. So like I know this is heavy, but like this is something that needs to come up, right? Because a lot of women do feel that particular way about things. And I'm not sure if there is a dynamic here about um like whether or not you are just inclined to be a certain way, or if it's a behavior that can be learned. But if it is a behavior that can be learned, I do hope I learn it one day. But what's your take on it?
Well, I think like there obviously needs to be a balance there, right? Because as you said, you can be a doormat, and we have frequently talked about how I was at some points, actually a lot of points, that kind of doormat. And just a few episodes ago, it might have been last episode actually, where I was talking about like the nature of abuse, where for a lot of people, a lot of cases, abusers tend to use traits that you are the most proud about within yourself, like the idea that you never give up on a person, you always try to understand them, traits that you find to be very good, very noble, very even heroic sometimes, and they can be turned against you. They can be used to hurt you, right? So I don't think that, as Miko said, you should still be smart about it. But it doesn't mean that you should forego the idea of being marupok in general, because my belief is that if you are opening yourself up to that kind of relationship, that kind of vulnerability, you are also opening yourself up to some sort of pain. So it is necessarily a part of that, you taking that risk. um so it is just a matter of like, you should not be completely closed off from the possibility of taking that risk, but at the same time you shouldn't be You know, you shouldn't just like see a bunch of red flags and go like, yeah, I'm willing to take the risk, right? There has to be a reason why. So in a sense, I guess what I'm saying is like, let's find a balance between Miko and I and your approach. Like, for sure, there is something beyond the pros and cons that, that something that transcends that
Really, I
tell
cannot
you,
read.
yeah, that tell you that a relationship is worth it or not. But at the same time, right, you should not just like forego this pros and cons list, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Looking deep, no. Yeah, it is that time. It is like deep talk hours
I
with
mean,
Nina and
yeah,
Kyle.
just for everyone's knowledge, we are recording this and it's currently like 1 a.m., almost 1 a.m. It's 12:30. It's like the deep talk hours. So I hope you are still with us and having fun. The next person we'd want to introduce is Thea Madriliejo. So Thea and I have been actually the three of us have been together in UPDS. So we met in the UP Debate Society. They are also known in the Philippines as the Tab Goddess. And if you don't know who they are, you've probably been in a tournament where they've been at, right? So if you're a Philippine debater, if you've had someone nagging you about ballots, that was probably Thea. And they are a whiz at tech because they help the coding of Tabber. They do the back end things of Tabber. They are learning how to use coding software. I don't know the terms, right? Um But that's why we got Thea because we need someone who can be our chief digital officer, and that's their main role, right? They handle the tabs during our tournaments, but they're also working on creating a system. Actually, like little spoiler alert, we're planning on launching a website soon, right? And Thea's in charge of coding that so that we can have all our episodes there. We can have premium content there. We can have links to our tournaments there as well. And basically, it's a big project that might launch in the distant future. Like, I'm not sure because everyone's busy now with COVID and everything. So it's going to be a future project. But Thea's in charge of that. They're also just a sweet and amazing person. Um, they are feisty as well. Like if you've ever been in a tournament and you have not submitted ballots or are causing a delay, you have faced their wrath. So you know who Thea is. You should know who they are. But I think we should leave it to Thea to introduce themselves. What do you think, Kyle?
Yeah. Why did you throw it to me?
I don't know. Maybe you had something to say about Thea. Like, how did you meet Thea?
um, yeah, the UP Debate Society.
Wala na, we're sabog na.
Yeah, I
Okay.
can't, I can't, I can't extend for you here, man.
Okay,
um,
okay.
I guess what I would say
You
is
don't
like
need to extend. Okay, let's just
to
play.
expound on what you said about
No, let's.
our good friend.
You're gonna say their middle name as an extension. Anyway, let's play their intro.
Hi everyone, my name is Thea. I'm Thea Madriliejo. I'm the Chief Digital Officer of Debatable, which basically means that I handle the technical and like website-y aspect of Debatable. A lot of things coming there, maybe in the next few months or so, I can't really say. But yeah, I like debating because it's kind of an escape, I guess. It's more of like how I can say things and convey my message to people in the most efficient way possible and talk about things that I wouldn't get to normally talk about with other people. Like, where would I talk about the Chinese economy, or where else would I talk about NFT's impact on the modern art market, if not in competitive debating? And my life motto would actually be around and find out.
Oh wow.
That was so scary.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
Damn. When
mean,
I said Thea was feisty, like I didn't know the extent until that outro. She just like deadpan ended it there.
I guess. Oh yeah, for the people who have not suffered Thea's wrath, around and find out. Yeah, so the thing about Thea is, I just want to hype them up a little bit.
Wow,
I
you have an
don't think
extension now.
I don't think that there is a single person active in the Philippine debate community who has done more for tabbing than Tea Madriliejo. I don't think that there's a single active person.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I mean, there are a few people catching up to Thea's legacy, but as of now, they are still Tab Goddess, right?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of interesting, like the juxtaposition. If what am I saying? I think it's interesting how the topic that they chose for their spiel sort of can be juxtaposed with their general like demeanor, which is um like they have a lot going on, but they're very interested in things like minimalism. And I think the spiel that Thea has for us is a critique on like what minimalism is. So it might actually be a metaphor for her entire being. Actually, yeah. Let's stick around and
Hi
find out.
everyone, it's Thea
Yeah,
again. So
let's
I'm
go.
gonna talk about the movement called minimalism. So it's not so related, just a little bit, to the art movement, but I want to talk about the simple, intentional lifestyle movement of minimalism. And the reason why I chose this topic was I actually read a book about it. I've actually been consciously practicing minimalism for over a year or so until I read the book. And the book is called The Longing for Less by Kyle Chayka. And it was really interesting. I was really into minimalism before the pandemic started, and I got to practice it because I had all this free time, and the lockdown made it easier for me to shift my practices consciously. But as we all know, this is going to be like 5 to 7 minutes of a rant about minimalism and that book in particular. So sit tight, everyone, and I'll start my rant slash speech topic presentation thing in 3, 2, 1. So, hi guys, I'm going to talk about what minimalism is. So, first, I'm just going to briefly define it, right? So, minimalism is a lifestyle movement geared towards simple, intentional lifestyles, and it's characterized by two main things, right? So, the first is avoiding overconsumption of goods and products, and second is the pursuit of intentional living. I'll get more into how these things look like in a little bit, but I want to talk about how the rise of minimalism came about, especially in modern pop culture. So we saw an interest peak in pop culture around probably 2012, when there were a lot of lifestyle and productivity bloggers talking about minimalism. So, for example, Joshua Becker or the Minimalists, who released a documentary and a set of essays and started this entire career tour where they talked to people about the impacts and the benefits of minimalism around 2012 or so. And as you may know, like the KonMari method, or Marie Kondo, is a classic tenet of minimalism with her decluttering strategy. And anyone you've ever seen on YouTube, read in a book, or listened to in a podcast, and they're a productivity or a lifestyle blogger, they've probably mentioned some tenets of minimalism, right? So what does minimalism look like? So it looks like a few things. So first is the decluttering aspect, which I think everyone is more or less familiar with when it comes to the KonMari method, which like really exploded in popularity perhaps a year or two before. It's been a long year period for us, and basically decluttering. Aside from that, there's also a tendency for clean, visually empty spaces. So this is where we kind of tie in with the art movement of minimalism a little bit, because when you look at the hashtags for minimalism, they're kind of interspersed with what is perceived to be, for example, minimalist art or minimalist spaces, and it kind of interplays as well with how we perceive minimalism to be. And one other classic aspiration of what minimalism looks like is not neutral colorways, like for example choosing black, gray, maybe some browns, a little bit of beige, but generally basic neutral colorways that are easy to blend with other people. And here are the benefits that people talk about minimalism. So for example, the first benefit that people claim towards minimalism is the fact that you get people to reassess mindless spending and overconsumption. So this is the biggest takeaway that I personally had with minimalism, that it induced the state where you had to consciously assess whether or not something was good or something was helpful to you or not. So is this something that sparks joy, or is this something that gives me happiness and something like that? And this would be the deciding factor whether or not you'd buy it, which I felt was a really important mindset to have, especially in the era of Shopee and Lazada or other online shopping platforms where all we ever wanted was just like to cram ourselves in our houses full of random stuff that we don't actually need. The second benefit that people generally ascertain to minimalism is how it sparked an entire wave of decluttering. I can list roughly 3 or 4 startups that are simply interested in the act of people decluttering, and that's their entire business model. Like, companies will ask you to declutter and they'll take away your stuff for free, and then they'll make use of it somehow, right? I actually worked and interned for one of those startups really briefly, and I'd rather not disclose which one it was. And the last benefit people commonly ascertain towards minimalism is how it introduced the concept of simple living, which is without the excess and determining what makes you happy. So this is where you eliminate the stuff that doesn't give you joy, or this is where you remove factors in your life that cause you unnecessary stress and pain. And this is where you go towards a truly minimalist and truly happy life, right? If you look at the history of minimalism, however, what you have to understand is the history of minimalism isn't just associated with the art movement. If we look at it as a lifestyle or a thought movement, it actually predates back as early as the ancient Greeks with the ancient Greek philosophy of Stoicism. So I think some of you may be familiar with Stoicism, and it's a really interesting deep dive towards lifestyles and like thought movements. So I'd suggest y'all check that out if you want to learn more about Stoicism. I'm not really a Stoicist, so that's not in the cards for me. But, a lot of notable figures, like, for example, Seneca or St. Francis of Assisi, and even like Henry Walden Thoreau was one of those people who were Stoicists and actively campaigned for minimalist tendencies, right? And this is where I get to the book, and this is where I probably start to get a little ranty, because what you have to notice is that so far it looks good, right? So far so good. Okay, minimalism is cool, minimalism is great, but there's one thing we're disregarding about the nuance of minimalism specifically, because when we talk about minimalism, nobody really talks about how minimalism is more or less an individual effort, how it doesn't really transcend to large scale impact, right? And I think this is one thing that the book raised for me and was never able to get out of my head, because at this point in time, you're thinking, okay, I can live simply, I can live intentionally, what now? How does my personal or my individual actions scale to actually help others? Or how does it, transcend the environmental and economic issues that we're facing? The short answer is it actually doesn't. If you look at it, the entire premise of the book of Longing for Less by Kyle Chayka is just simply saying that minimalism is an escapist fantasy, or maybe just escapism, an ideological escape for those who could not deal with the ramifications of capitalism. So the ramifications of capitalism are fairly simple, right? Overconsumption, the continuous and enduring need for you to accumulate capital so you can afford all the cool things in life and all the cool things that other people get to enjoy but you somehow don't get to enjoy. But this becomes a means for us to understand or try to come to terms with the fact that not all of us are born into the same levels of privilege or the same levels of access that other people have, which is pretty interesting if not for the fact that minimalism in itself, since it's more or less an internet thought movement, kind of relies on the concept of curated authenticity. And that's a really interesting concept. And the reason why I think this is pretty cool is because curated authenticity more or less relies on the idea that we're just basically trimming ourselves down and we're just making the best versions of ourselves on the internet and on social media, which is a pretty big thought. But, I'm around 7 minutes, so I'm going to end my rant here. Thank you all for listening to me rant about minimalism.
Are you a
I
minimalist?
I didn't notice it was 7 minutes already. I was having so much fun listening to that. I agree. It was sort of ranty, but in a really, really good way. I was like, yeah, it is just an escapist fantasy. But
Yeah.
as to your question, as to whether I'm a minimalist, absolutely not. I am not a minimalist. Although for very very long time I have wanted to be. Like I just haven't gotten the opportunity, and maybe now I wouldn't want to be a minimalist, to be honest.
It's more like an aesthetic, you know? Like minimalism now, when I think about it, is more of an aesthetic because the pieces that you get to have a minimalist lifestyle, they're not cheap either, right? Like they're very expensive as well. So it is sort of like a make believe of rich people to be minimalist. Or at least that's that's how I see it. But I understand Thea's takeaways as well from the book. And really interested in reading that book now. Like Thea, if you're listening, I do want a copy if you have an ebook or something, or if you have the physical version, I'd love to read it. But personally, I'm a maximalist. Like, if there's a term for it, like, if you've seen my desk, there's no space that isn't covered with tech or crystals or just knickknacks. And, that sparks joy for me. So I guess everyone's different. Minimalism might be your cup of tea. But if it is, right, I think you have to start questioning, is it because you truly desire to consume less? Or is it still very capitalistic like what Thea is proposing?
Yeah, the thing about minimalism, a lot of people have now been saying that it is actually just available for the privileged. So there was some analysis before comparing like hoarding behaviors between people who are very rich and people who are more impoverished. So the finding there, if I'm not mistaken, was that if you are less privileged, economically speaking, you are more likely to hoard. Because if you're going to give something up, you're more likely to think of things like, I don't know when the next time I will be able to afford this. Or I don't know when the next time, I don't know the next time that I'll be able to get something like this again. So as opposed to if you're very privileged, you'd go like, if I need this again in the future, I'll be able to buy it. Like, of course, that's not what you think of when you like throw stuff out, or if you donate them. You don't go like, I will just get another one of these. But it's much easier for you to draw the conclusion that, yeah, this doesn't spark joy for me. No, I don't need this anymore. I can just donate it or throw it out. If you had the resources to readily replace it, if you actually do find out that you need it. So there's like, people who are less privileged are more likely to think about those things.
Yeah, true. I think, like, I did some decluttering recently. Like, Kyle knows this. Like, I did throw some clothes, and I realized a lot of the times I used to hoard my clothes. And I used to keep my mom's clothes, but it was because I didn't really have money before to buy my own, right? But now that I'm a little bit more like financially stable, I do have the privilege of being able to look at something and throw it out or donate it. Um, yeah, people are wondering why I don't sell them. Like I prefer donating. But anyway, that's another story. But yeah, I donated my clothes because in my head I'm like, okay, I can just buy another one of these or something else I like better. And I realized that's such privileged thinking. So it's just an application of what Kyle said. And I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. Kyle, have you ever been in a situation where you're decluttering and you easily let things go because, you know, you have opportunities again to reclaim it?
I don't even know the meaning of the word declutteration. Because yeah, I'm a very cluttery person. Like, you don't see it right now, but I'm surrounded by so much clutter. Like, there's an empty glass over there. There's an open book here.
Okay, Kyle, that's not being like hoardy though. That's just
That's just
being
being
messy.
messy.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but there's like legitimately a lot of clutter. Like, there are like books over there that I keep around near me because I am going to read them in the near future. So my thinking is that um it'll be too much of a hassle if I have to like rearrange things like all over again just to take them out again later, which is why I tend to like keep a bunch of stuff like nearby, and that ends up being clutter. But that's just my personal flaws. It has nothing to do with the movement of minimalism or maximalism, to be honest. It's just a personal flaw.
But I do think that you are, in a way, a maximalist. Like, you enjoy knickknacks. Like, I've seen your room. You enjoy collecting figurines and stuff. Even if, like, minimalists would say they serve no purpose and they should be thrown out. Like, I think that, it sparks joy and that's why it should stay. That's another critique I have of minimalism. Like, it seems very impository of what should spark joy for you. Like, grays and beiges should spark joy. But if they're too colorful, and it doesn't fit the particular aesthetic, you're doing it wrong. And I know that's not what they say, but that's how it's practiced, and that's how people feel about it. And that's the pressure that people feel once they enter the minimalist movement.
Yeah, I feel like it's more of a functional thing. It's an instrumentalist way of thinking. Like they don't really consciously choose like I think beige or grays or whites are just aesthetically more pleasing to my eye. It's just more of like you can match them with more things. That's just my thinking. Like you can just match them with more things, and that's the reason why it's more useful for you to have them around if you're a minimalist, as opposed to if you're just like buying everything that does spark joy. But on the point of maximalism, I think there's a reason why certain things spark joy. It's not just so much like I like the way that it looks. In my case, it is that plus the fact that everything that I put on like my shelf has some personal connection to me. Like there's a story behind those things. Um, so I do have a collection of My Little Pony figures, and I can tell you who gave me each one. I didn't buy a single one of them. That collection was created as a result of a lot of different people thinking about me, buying a gift for me. And Nina, you're one of them. You gave me Rarity, and you also gave me the Ochako figure, the Uraraka Ochako figure, which is on my shelf as well. um One of my other friends gave me a big statue recently of Lady Justice. So my favorite law books are placed there next to that statue. It's just like I created a space that is symbolically, a representation of not just me and my own interests, but also my relationships with other people, which is why I have so much of these knickknacks in my room as well.
I'm not sure how to wrap this up. Kyle, help,
How
please.
how do we wrap this up? This has been a very long episode,
Yeah,
but yeah,
I mean, it's episode 100. Like, we introduced the theme. Again, I guess I want to end it by being thankful again, like the previous episode, because it's just so unbelievable to me that we've gotten to this point. Like, 100 episodes. Like, you gave statistics, right, on how long it would take to listen to all of the audio. Like, do you remember it?
yeah. If you let's say like you're Jeff Bezos and you go to the moon. Well, no, Jeff Bezos has not gone to the moon. He's just a millionaire. He's just a billionaire that goes slightly above orbit and then goes back down. But let's say that one of them goes to the moon. If they start playing the first episode of Debatable when they launch, they would be able to get to the moon, go back to Earth, and then get back to the moon again, and still not be able to finish listening to episode 100.
That's a lot of episodes. That's a lot of hours.
Yeah. um the thing about Debatable is at some point maybe people are thinking of it as like we earn from this or that it's a job. Really, no. We do
Feels
have
like a job.
some
Yeah, it feels
it
like a
it
job.
sometimes feels like a job, like we do feel obligated to produce content. But at the very end of it, it is us doing something that we just like doing for the benefit of a community. And there's really not that big a profit incentive. We do have some income generating activities like Debatable Open 2022, which you can register for now, but it's really just our love for the craft and the community, and we wanted really to give back to it. And this is going to be our fourth year. We're entering our fourth year of um making this podcast. And
Really? Wow.
yeah. It's our anniversary in March, and then that would be the end of our third year and the beginning of our fourth year doing this podcast. So we have gone through honestly so much, and we're still firm in that idea that we want to keep contributing. We want to keep giving back to this community. We still want to get more people debating. We still want more people to talk about certain things. And we still, personally, we also want a platform to just rant about things that you want to talk about for that day.
I'm happy we have an audience that celebrates with us the nerdiness that comes with the debate community. As our community of nerds, we wouldn't be here without you. I'm not even sure how many followers we have already because I haven't been checking. And that just amazes me still that we've reached like 5 digits even. And I'm so thankful. I want to keep doing this. Thank you for giving us the space and the love to be able to do all of this. So that's it for episode 100. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.